Okay, so this is part 2 of the answers. I've copied in the answers. What I would recommend you do is pause the video and take some time to check the answers in this table against your work. I'll stress a couple of things. The nitrogen one is particularly interesting. You can see nitrogen has a proton number of 7. It's got 5 electrons in that outer shell. It does actually gain 3 to form a full outer shell and become that N3-. You can see oxide, nitride, chloride, all ending in "ide" because they're negatively charged. You will have noticed when you do some work on, when you do the ion formations task on Education Perfect tomorrow, you will see that polyatomic ions often have a different naming pattern. Okay, so recognize that this pattern of full name for the metal and ending in "ide" for a non-metal works when we're dealing with one atom. But tomorrow you're going to look at some polyatomic atoms, and they will have endings like 8. And in a polyatomic atom ending in 8 is a sign normally that there is a certain number of oxygen in the polyatomic ion. But just keep in mind that that's something you'll be learning tomorrow. Question 6. Neon has an atomic number of 10. It has electrons arranged as 2-8. Suggest why neon is very unreactive. Well, look at that number. Oh, let me see if I can restart the pen. How do I restart the pen? Okay, I can't get the pen to restart, so I'll just have to type the answers up while I'm talking to you. Neon has an atomic number of 10. It has electrons arranged as 2-8. Suggest why neon is very unreactive. Well, if you look at that outer shell, it has a valence. It already has a full valence shell. And as a consequence, it does not form ions. Describe why beryllium and calcium atoms both form ions with a charge of 2+. This comes back to this idea of the full outer shell, right? So for calcium and beryllium, both have 2 valence electrons. They both lose 2 electrons to form a full outer shell. And when you lose those 2 electrons, that is a loss of 2 negative charges from the atom. And so the consequence of that, if you lose 2 negative charges, you now have 2 more protons than you do electrons, and so you have a charge of +2. And if we just finish off with this final question, describe why oxygen and sulfur both form ions with a charge of -2. In both cases, both oxygen and sulfur have 6 electrons in their valence shell. 6 electrons in that outer shell. To form a full outer shell, they have to gain 2 electrons. That's an addition of 2 negative charges to the atom. And so they have an overall charge of 2-. Effectively saying they have 2 more electrons in that ion now than they do protons.